I think we're off and running here. New chat, here we go. Sending data. So it says we're streaming on Facebook. Looks like there might be an error occurring on one of these. Let's see if we can get it back on here. All right, we should be live now on YouTube. We're live now on Facebook. Looks like we're waiting on X. If you happen to be in there, just saying hello, let me know. Then I can see if the chat's working. Make sure my audio's running. And we can get rolling today. Sound good? Let's do it. Just gonna wait until I have just a message in the chat so I can make sure that it works. So say hello. Good to see you. Welcome. It's Thursday, 8 o'clock. Party time, as they say in the Kaiser household. And I'm going to pull this down. Let's start a new one. Okay. Okay, let's get right to it. Took me a minute to get on here today. There we go. All right, now we're showing up. Eileen, got the bodyguard ready to roll. Good. Kim, nice to see you. Tracy, hello. Irene McBean, hello, hello. Corey, good to see you. Tara, a mysterious. Oh, there it is, a wave. Now we're rocking. Cool. So today we have an interesting topic. Yeah, it keeps saying that I'm getting an error on my X stream. I'm not sure why. Janine is here from Aurora. All right, I'm ready to rock and roll. So I got an interesting one today. There was a new paper that came out yesterday in Nature, and I think you guys will find it interesting. Matthias says, hello, good to see you again. I'm gonna pull this over closer so I'm not looking way over there. All right, so let's get after it. So the paper that came out this week, yesterday, is I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, we talk a lot about autonomic problems. It's going to be something that most people are interested in on this line. We've got Gwen from New Zealand. I got my Nomad Over Normal team. Good to hear from you. Hope you're doing great. Anyway, I'm gonna try to not get sucked into my chat too bad, so I can go over this, and then what we'll do is we'll talk about it and take some questions and have some fun. So Jessica from Connecticut is here. Irene McBean is talking about the CRISPR to remove, this is Rove, but I think it's supposed to remove HIV from human DNA. Could this possibly be useful for COVID mRNA? We will find out. There are people working on that right now. But here's what I thought was interesting, and I'll just kind of cut to the chase, and we'll go through it. So I think this is going to be helpful, and is useful for me, useful for the people we spoke with today, kind of about this topic. But basically, the paper said, hey, ischemic endothelial necrotosis induces hemolysis in COVID-19 angiopathy. What on earth does that mean? I get it. I can tell you're already falling asleep on me, but what it means is kind of what people have been pointing to quite a bit since people have been taking like an honest look at COVID and COVID-related illnesses, right? And so I'll walk through this real quick. We're going to just kind of jump through it, but I think that more than anything, it helps us understand a little bit more about what we're doing, how to approach, and kind of moving forward. What it talks about is this idea of microangiopathy. What does that mean? So angio just means blood vessel. Micro means small, so the little ones. And then pathy is like there's something wrong with it, right? So there's something wrong with the small blood vessels. There's a pathology in the small blood vessels. We know that's a thing that happens with COVID. That's not news to anybody. Well, maybe to some people, but it's not new news. But it's saying here it contributes to both the acute and chronic complications of the disease. and the disease process related to kind of anything with a spike protein, right? So what it does is it goes in, it affects the endothelial cells. And what happens, part of the job, so endothelial cells, for general purposes, for simplistic purposes, we can think about them as having like two really, really big jobs. Number one super big job is that it helps to control the vessel dilation and constriction. So like how big or small the tube is. We talked about in the past, how big or small the tube is going to make a difference on how fast or slow the blood is flowing through that particular tube. So I want to take a second, actually, we're going to step away from this source, and I want to pull up a different one real quick. Let's see how good I am. I kind of threw this together late because this just came out, but I do think that we can get some value out of it. Let me see, pull this up here. And grab an iPad. Ugh. Real quick. So I can play it. No stealing my passwords, please. Alright. So let's play that real quick. Cool. So we'll pull that up. Where are you? Bear with me just a moment. Okay. So this, I just wanted to grab a quick picture of this vascularity so you can see what I'm talking about and why it's cool. Okay. Saw out of the corner of my eye a hello from Michelle and a hello from Black Cat from the Metro Detroit area. Love it. Home team. Okay, so these are blood vessels. It's really cool. This is the arterial system, right? So when you look at these, you can kind of see coming up here, this is our arterial tree. So this is all coming from the heart, projected up. These are the carotids. This is kind of the brain looking, well, ooh, I'm in a mirror. So it's like the brain looking to the left. Courtney, hello, hello. We got our Michigan team running strong today. Like that. Okay, so when you're looking at these vessels, though, you can see that you've got these big vessels and they turn into small vessels and they get smaller and smaller the more they perforate into the actual brain tissue, the closer they get to the neurons. So the closer I am to the neuron, the smaller the vessel is, it becomes a capillary, right? Cool. So if we understand that and we go back to our article and we talk about, hey, there's something going on in those small vessels. Sorry, this is a little clunky today, but we'll get it. So if we look at these small vessels, it's saying, you know what? One of the interesting things about this is these endothelial cells, particularly in organs of people that have had COVID, they're all jacked up. They're all beat up. The vasculature is damaged. When we have the damage to that endothelial cell, it affects the size of the vessel, and it is going to also affect as there's a shearing force. So what does that mean? Like as the fluid pushes against the walls of those vessels, it creates a shear. And that shear is also what helps to stimulate some of the chemistry, simple things, and nitric oxide being one of them, right? That's a common one people know. But it kind of creates this nice buffer from the wall to prevent stuff from sticking to it. It's like putting butter in a pan, right? So the more there's pressure against that vessel wall, it kind of lubricates around it, and that allows that blood to pass through smoothly. And what they noticed was that in people with COVID, or long COVID especially, there was this group we were seeing where the red blood cells were breaking and causing this like stickiness to occur on the vessels. So why would the red blood cells break? Well, they can tend to break because of the interface with that endothelial damage. So if we damage the endothelium and then we create the structural problem inside the vessel, and we lose the ability to be able to control kind of the tone of the vessel, now we've run into problems with being able to push blood through it. And that's what it was finding, is now we have these red blood cells that are kind of like sticky on the vessel, and it causes this what they call red blood cell. Oh, let me pull it up here. Red blood cell. Where is it on this one? Okay, So we've got these hemolyzed red blood cells at the site of the endothelial cell death. Okay? What does that mean? What it means is we get this exaggeration of the red blood cells breaking down. They stick together, they clump, that's what aggregate means. And then we get the small blood cells get obstructed. So endothelial cells break down, we get this red blood cell kind of goo, and then it sticks and it prevents blood from going through, right? And this reduces circulation within the organs, and then we get the organs eventually get injured or die, etc. But what's very important about that is it's happening independent of platelets and fibrin. So platelets and fibrin are what we think about that help us signal a clot. And one of the things that people talked about a lot was this clotting factor, right? So von Willebrand's factor, things that were making the blood sticky and clotting, but they're actually finding it can happen without that. The red blood cells are breaking down with this endothelial damage, and then we get these secondary problems. And then this last part is the part that I find interesting. It says therapeutic targeting of this hemolytic process may reduce microvascular obstruction in COVID-19 and other human disease related to organ ischemia. So what they're finding in this paper, and many others like it, are the things that kind of correlate with what we see with boots on the ground. They correlate with what we're seeing in the lab, where people are having a hard time with being able to control that microvasculature. Main way we can see this is by looking at Doppler studies. We can see errors in autoregulation, which is the ability to constrict and dilate the blood vessels. And we can see problems additionally with neurovascular coupling, where we go to operate neurons, like we have you do some math, and all of a sudden the blood flow tanks, right? And that shouldn't happen. We should have more. And in these cases, we're getting less. So these are the same things that we are seeing boots on the ground. The difference is when it comes to the therapeutic targets, we know the things that are tried and true. Should people investigate things that can affect the blood cell aggregation? Absolutely. But I think the thing that we miss in presenting this data is we should be doing the things that we already know how to do that support people healing now in their current state, that are dealing with this every single day. It's 2025. We still have people suffering from this. Let's do things that we know work now. And the things that we know work now come with the stimulation of the neuron, particularly in the brain, when we're talking about the brain, or the tissue at large in the area damaged. We tend to talk a lot about brain because that's like the focus, but you can take that idea and spread it to other organs when those are the problem. So what do we do with that? We know that if we want to, let's say, let me draw you a little picture here. Window capture, properties. I'm going to get faster at this. I'll find a better way. There we go. Okay, pull that down. Okay, just got to find where I'm at. It's a big window. Okay. So let's say, oh, hello, Christy Lee. So let's say that we've got a neuron over here. Where's a neuron going to show up on the screen? Okay. So here's our neuron right there. And let's say I've got this nice blood vessel that's going to come into that neuron. Crushing drawing today. You're welcome. So I've got this blood vessel that's coming in. It's a tube. And if I've got a problem where I can't control the amount of blood that's going to go into that baby, if this is just passive, it's weaker, it's not constricting the way that it should, I may find that in times when my head is up, the amount that goes in there is going to go down. When my head is down, like I'm bending over tying my shoes, or I'm doing handstands for some reason, or getting out of bed, or brushing your teeth over the sink, we're going to find that as that neuron gets lower toward my heart, it gets easier to push the blood in there. and then we're going to drive more in. But what is the interesting part is in order for it to move through the capillary and into that neuron, even if I like flood the area with blood, in order for it to get to the actual cell to do work, we have to stimulate the cell. So we actually have to activate the neuron. Without activating the neuron, it doesn't upload new tissue to be able to support that, right? So if we have a problem where we're getting an injury, where we're having symptoms, where we're having dysfunction, what we want to think about is, yes, this vessel is important, but we also have to think about how does it tie to the end organ. And the thing that we know is that exercise in its varying types affects outputs of this system. So number one, it helps to be able to heal the actual endothelial tissue itself. But exercise also is a stimulus to the brain. When I am moving, it makes my brain have to be activated. And it activates a lot of the brain typically because when we exercise, we're using a lot of our body. Just said simply. So in order to activate this, I have to activate that neuron. Now there are two features of this that matter. Number one is when we think about exercise, a lot of times what we're thinking about is just like cardiovascular or strength exercise. And those things both work. But also we can make it even better, and we can think about when I apply exercise, what I'm doing is providing a stimulus, and then I'm asking fuel to be delivered for that stimulus. So if I have, like I said, if we've got in our hypothetical problem, we've got this neuron or this body of neurons is not working very well, we need to apply exercise in a way that stimulates the target. So number one, it's got to hit the right target. And number two, it has to be at an effective dose. Meaning, if I try to stimulate this too aggressively, what actually happens is it fires the cell anaerobically without oxygen, and it can actually break that cell, which is not ideal if you're thinking about neurorehab. But if I do it at a small dose that this cell can tolerate and I target it correctly, I activate the cell and I get the ability to engage that vascular system or to stimulate the endothelium. So we have this two-factor approach where number one, we just have to get blood to flow through the vessel, and then number two, we have to target directly within the areas of the brain or the tissue that we are trying to target. Okay? So this is the super cool part because we already know these things work. We know that if somebody has a stroke, this is their best shot at improving functional performance after a stroke. We know that after concussion, same thing. We know that in people that have neurodegeneration, they have low cognitive function. When we apply these things for 12 weeks, we see that their cognition gets better. We see that they can dual task better. We see that they ambulate better, right? So there's a body of work that's getting older now that shows that targeted therapeutic exercise is super helpful when we're dealing with endothelial dysfunction and neurologic dysfunction. If we can tie the two together, then we have a way for people to understand how to solve these problems in the short term rather than waiting for a magical medication to come along. So that is what I take away from this is it's a thing, it's another paper, it's another one that supports the tried and true, which is slowly, gently activating the system again, building its tolerance back up, and being able to use the internal healing mechanisms that we have already within us to be able to support the healing of these systems. So that's what I took away from this paper. I thought it was super useful. There's a lot more like this one, but this one came out just yesterday, so I thought we should tackle that. A lot of people ask about, like, well, what do we do to solve these things? That is at the core of it. So when we go really deep and we're looking at the diagnostic process of trying to understand where exactly we're aiming, what we're looking for is like, which neurons are we after? Which pools do we need to target? And what is the integrity of the vascular system that we have to feed it? Do we need to work on that to get it stronger? Or can we just go whole hog right at those neurons and try to get after it? So that is the way we're thinking extrapolated to all the different parts of your body. So anything that has a sensor, so that can be things that you feel, can be things that you move, things that you see, moving your head, taste, smell, but it can also be the things you think about. How do I process my vision? How do I think of, or how does my brain deal with things that are moving, but then maybe I'm moving too? How does it deal with when I'm thinking about one thing and then I get scared? Or if I am having a hard time with my focus or attention or memory, etc. These are all ways that we think about how you want to target that brain. Cool? So I will leave that rant there. I'm going to take this picture down, and I will look at the chat now, and we'll see what's going on. All right. Okay, so we got a couple questions from Mathason, looks like. Atara asked, like the myelin sheath. So I think you're talking about the endothelial cell. Actually, let me pull up a picture of the endothelium so you can see it. But it is not exactly the same as it's not exactly the same thing as myelin. The main difference being, cancel. Oh, shoot, I didn't grab a good picture of it. Well, I'm going to have to just talk about it. So myelin sheaths is kind of like if you think about a wire, and it's got copper on the inside and it's got a plastic or rubber sheath around the outside. And that insulation, for all intents and purposes, kind of like allows that conduction to happen linearly down the wire. And to a degree, a myelin sheath does that. It's a fatty sheath that goes around the wire, and it allows the conduction to happen in a linear way, which is pretty cool. The endothelium is different. It's on the inside of a blood vessel. It's on the inside layer, and it helps in the signaling mechanism for the muscles to be able to constrict or dilate within that vessel. And that constriction or dilation happens along the duration of that tube toward the end point, particularly if it's going to a muscle or a nerve or an organ or whatever the thing is. So the endothelium is on the inside, and if there's damage there, then we lose the ability to control constriction and dilation. But then also the chemical exchange that happens there can be impaired. We can have some of the secondary chemistry that happens doesn't work very well. We can also see errors with vasoreactivity. A lot of our patients experience this. This is where we measure their CO2 levels to be lower in the blood, and the vasculature doesn't respond to them appropriately the same way it doesn't respond to pressure appropriately, which causes a lot of problems with perfusion in the brain. Good question. Cool. Mathason said there's another question, so that means there was a first question. Where is it? Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's a continuation from last week's question. My other question is about your transcranial Doppler. What sort of device is that? Could you use a regular Doppler, or what sort of equipment is required? So the one we use for transcranial Doppler, basically transcranial Doppler is just going through the skull, and there's a kind of a special Doppler setup that allows you to be able to do that with the types of probes. They're just a little bit smaller, different than a typical wand. And usually there's a head cap that's used to hold them fixed in place, because you can't really hold them and then move people around because the incination angle changes. And we use those so it fixes onto your head. We compare the two sides, and that allows us to do things where we're manipulating things that are happening with your head and body and measuring the blood flow at the same time. So hopefully that helps. Nicholas, welcome. Good to hear from you. Jessica says, so this paper explains why someone's clotting lads can come back normal, but they're symptomatic. Yeah, so that was a thing, right? There was a lot of time where we were really looking hard at microclots, right? And people were looking at clotting factors, a lot of nattokinase, a lot of lumbrokinase being sold during that time. But it wasn't like the silver bullet, right? There was still something missing. And I think that's what initiates this type of paper where we're seeing, we're actually seeing like a breakdown of the endothelium messes with the red blood cells in a way that causes its own problems with being able to generate clotting because it's all stuck to the wall. So it's kind of like the walls have the sensors in them, and then you take this like red blood cell paste and you smear it on the wall, and then the wall can't do its normal things. It can't transmit substances between the wall, which sucks for chemical messaging, and then it can't do its normal jobs. And then when that happens, we get this ischemia reperfusion thing that happens where we block the blood flow, and then we may do some engineering in the brain, freaking out to get it back, and it rushes back in and it causes swelling and the cell walls start to inflame and the vessel inflames, and you get all these things that we saw with COVID and we still see today, not only in COVID or from the post-COVID measures that were taken or other things like it. A little dancing there. But they can call that vascular inflammation. One of the things that we kind of also think about from a generalized standpoint is when that inflames like that, it becomes extra hard because now when you look at a vessel that's inflamed, the internal lumen is going to be smaller. So the hole is smaller, easier to block up, also more difficult to get blood through. But then it's also harder to dilate against that because the vessel itself is swollen. So the ability to be able to manipulate it bigger and smaller isn't as good. You post a short, Irene says, didn't you post a short recently about how if there's damage in the hippocampus mapped to certain areas of a neuron, then typically there's also deregulation of blood flow to that region, and does that also apply to brain neurons? Yeah, not even just specific to the hippocampus, although I don't know if I was talking specifically about that or not, but it's more about the somatosensory cortex. So we have different maps and different systems. So like the map that's like for your body, the way you feel, all of the sensors for feeling kind of go up into the somatosensory cortex and the parietal lobe. All the things you feel, like the map of space around you, when you look out, that's a visual map. So we call that a retinotopic map. So map of the retina. And then we also have like auditory based maps as well. Like, so if you hear something over here, it sounds different than if you hear something that's over here. And all of these maps converge and talk to each other to create a more dynamic, high resolution map that we use to generate functionality. So anytime we see problems in processing an error in an area, we can assume that the vasculature in that area is going to be affected. But then also, because that's going to affect the pathways and neurons that go to that part of the brain, we know that those parts of the brain are affected as well. And there's been some really good papers on that. I don't know if I have any offhand, but I did a presentation years ago where we went through that. Maybe I can find that. Good question. So yes, the short answer is yes, it does apply to brain neurons as well. And that's why we can look at where people may have errors in those maps and then track that back and see if we can triangulate whether or not we're seeing the same thing in those territories of the brain. Tyson said, what would it feel like if you overdose and the neuron overfires? I'm not sure what you're overdosing on, number one. But if a neuron, interesting thing about neurons is they don't do well in an anaerobic state. So you really have to get them fuel, otherwise they don't last very long. We talk about it in terms of drowning, right? So you can only be without oxygen for a short period of time, a couple minutes, before we start to have a breakdown of cells within the brain. So the overfiring of that might only apply in terms of like breaking the neuron down if it's anaerobically overfiring at that point. So it's based on the metabolism. So if we have enough aerobic capacity where we can feed the neuron and it overfires, we may just see that there's a long-term potentiation change, or we may see that the cell lyses in and of itself. Jessica, can this theory apply to people who have ME/CFS and PEM? You just have to do really graded therapy. I look at these as largely the same thing. When you look kind of at the underlying structure of these, Peter Novak made some good observation on this, and then the team out of the Netherlands as well, where we see hypoperfusion, very similar in ME/CFS and POTS. We see inflammatory load, post-exertional malaise. There's a ton of overlap here, even coming down to the central structures, looking at the medullary. So looking at the MRI, looking at swelling in the medullary area, and then ultimately atrophy in the medullary area. There's a ton of overlap in these, and I'm not convinced that they are widely different. So when you look at the graded therapy, that's the way I think about it. So when these things are neurological, you're basically trying to decide, I have a budget of energy. And with that budget of energy, I want to target it specifically at the underperforming cells. If you have a bunch of cells that are doing fine, but then you have other ones that are not, they're still generally linked to each other. So we may have groups of pathways that just aren't able to keep up when we're doing a more complex task. So that complex task is only going to be as strong as kind of the weakest layer of function. So we want to target that weakest layer and bring it back up to par along with the other functional pathways, so that you're able to operate at a higher endurance level again. So it's not just doing broad-based exercise, although that can be useful. What the paradigm we're trying to get people to think about is targeted exercise, saying like, what is the weakest thing? If we only have a small budget of energy to spend, we should spend it on the thing that needs the help the most and take everything else away, and then just work that small area until it can reach parity with everything else, and then get the whole thing churning again. So starting out very focused and then starting to pull back in the other functions until we're kind of at global once again. So that's a really good question and a big concept that's really important to me, because I think it makes a huge difference in how we allocate resources for people. Matthiasen asks again, is there a way to measure, if any, of the neurons that have overfired or died? I've heard that concussion injuries can't be seen on imaging. Absolutely. Great question. So if we can't see them on imaging, how can we ascertain how healthy they are? So we can't look at it and see. People have tried blood tests. They're kind of hard to do, especially after the fact. But what we can see is if they can work. So the same way you might say, I can tell if someone has an injury to a muscle by how much force that muscle can output, how strong it is, how fast it is, how coordinated it is. So we look at these pools of cells the same way, or these pathways the same way. So for example, we may look at someone and say like, hey, when they try to look with their eyes, rather than just being able to hold that still, like no big deal, we see their eyes are like shaking and bouncing around. And the type of shake that their eyes do can tell us about, okay, well, if it's holding the gaze over here, I know that there are neurons on this side of the brainstem that do that, and they get communicated from upstream. And if there's an area from the superior colliculus and the substantia nigra that aren't holding their charge very well, then I know I'm going to see these little square wave jerks that are in that field. Okay, cool. So then I'll go up and I'll say, well, what else talks to that nigra? Is there a tremor there? And I'll look and see, okay, well, is there a tremor? If we might see this little bit of a tremor over here, and I go, well, which side is that on? Oh, it's actually over here. And we might be able to look at that and say, as that crosses over and communicates, that nigra is going to be implicated. I'm getting crossed up because I'm looking in a weird mirror here. But that may get crossed up to where my substantia nigra is not working as well. And then I would say, okay, well, I'm also noticing that when I have them dual task or when tap their hands, it's slow, right? And those of you that have been in the office have seen me do this, where we might say, oh, well, they tap their fingers kind of weird. It's not like fast and crisp. We get these little like hesitations in there. And then when they walk, they don't swing their arm quite right. So then we can come in and say, okay, we want to do things that are going to be stimulatory to that nigra. So we think about all the things that would talk to that. So we might have somebody do a certain type of eye movements, or we may have them rotate in a certain way or move their arm in a certain way and stack those pathways together. And if they make that substantia nigra function a little bit better, then we see, hey, the eyes smooth out. That's pretty cool. They stop bouncing. And then, oh, the tremor goes away. That's pretty cool. And they can move their fingertips. That's really great. And then we use those measures as a way to determine, like, what is the working capacity of those neurons in those areas. And looking at that functional approach allows us to be able to say, like, how's it working? How are these things working together? How can we isolate them down into descript areas? And then how do we pull that back out into generalized function? So if I'm having a hard time over here and I'm getting that tremor and that nigra is going, probably not sleeping very well. I don't move very well. I may get headaches. I may have some vascular problems that come from that. I may notice that I can't think very strongly because I'm getting like bradyphrenic, where my thoughts also get slower. So there are things that look like like my eyes bounce, whatever. But it's how that interacts with the whole pathway that teaches us things. So we look at these biomarkers that have been established in other conditions in neurology. So it's not like weird. We didn't make it up on the fly. It's things that already exist in the world of neurology. We're just applying them in a little bit different way, trying to understand how do we help understand what the function is and actually use it to get better. Cool? Awesome. That's a great question. You guys are on it again. Man, You guys make me look good. Just kidding. Joanna says, thank you for doing these. You're welcome. Eileen says, cool. Good info. Matthiasen, does this mean that too aggressive concussion rehab can actually cause damage? It can, well, if it's very, very aggressive, it can, yeah. And also, this is where we can see, so one of the things that was interesting is study from the Buffalo group noted that people that had autonomic-based injuries from concussion had slower recovery times and more arduous recovery times. And what that makes you realize, like, as we have a harder time fueling the brain, number one, you're going to be more symptomatic. But number two, it's harder to be able to rehab them because you're constrained by the fuel source. And if you don't have enough fuel, then it's really hard to make something stronger. It's harder to rehab it, and we can actually make it worse. And some of you have probably experienced that if you've been in a physical therapeutic environment where you just keep feeling worse and there's no upside to it. You go and you feel bad. You go and you feel bad. In those cases, then we want to try to strip that down and target, like, what is the one thing? Those of you that have heard me talk before, I talk a lot about my mentor is Dr. Carrick. Wonderful, wonderful, taught me so much. I owe everything to that. And one of the most important things that I learned observing him, not something he said, something I observed, was that he was always trying to figure out what is the most efficient way to stimulate this person. He had this huge repertoire of things he knew how to do to be able to stimulate a brain, still does, but he would isolate it down to just this smallest feature and the smallest input, and he would just go after it like a dog, right? And doing that and just watching that process of, it's not about trying to throw everything at someone, it's trying to find the most efficient way to heal the exact problem that you're trying to heal. And what I learned through that process was the people that understood the brain the best, that could dive the furthest into the nuance, had the best probability of having a good outcome because they knew exactly what they were trying to target and they knew exactly how to target it. And that was such a huge learning experience for me. I'm very thankful for that. And what Mathiesen's talking about right now is precisely that, is if we don't know what we're doing, we just try to do everything. But when we do everything, we have a bigger probability of actually injuring the tissue, setting people back, making it harder for them to progress. Cool. Okay, Joanna asks, can upper cervical work fix dysautonomia? If it's an upper cervical problem, then yes, but it's really hard to know because that's not the only way that dysautonomia presents itself. Dysautonomia itself can be a lot of different things too. So two things that we'd probably work on if we were trying to engineer this, we would say, number one, what exactly is the underlying mechanism of that particular dysautonomia? And then number two, if we know that mechanism, what is going to be the best way to create a stimulation? That might be something like upper cervical work, or it might be something else. We don't know, but it can be a great tool. Oh, Dr. Junior is saying hello to Joanna. Follow up to that is as in a course of upper cervical treatment on its own in some circumstances. It can be, yeah, if that is the problem, but you'd want to make sure that that is the problem. This is kind of one of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago, where the way we have things set up in an ability to learn them is kind of we know the symptoms, right? So we get a diagnosis based on our symptoms, and then we know the tools. And trying to connect those things can be random because we don't know necessarily what the symptoms are exactly from, and therefore we don't know if the tool will apply. So we're trying to go from symptom straight to tool, which is really hard to do. What is more useful is symptom gets you in the ballpark of what you should consider. And then from there, you can do exploration, observation, testing that helps you understand the mechanism. And that mechanism is what links the symptom to the appropriate tool to solve the symptom. You're not really solving the symptom per se, you're solving the underlying mechanism, but that underlying mechanism is the thing that is causing the symptom to occur, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what we tend to be missing along the way, is we get so focused on our symptoms, these symptoms equal this diagnosis. And then we take that diagnosis and we say, let's find a tool. But the problem is the diagnosis is based only on symptoms, not on mechanism. We have to do the next step, which is figure out what is the underlying mechanism so that we know which tools to apply. So that is the part, that's where I am trying to make my dent in the world, is like, let's look at the underlying part because it makes the tool job way easier, less likely to miss, less likely to spend a bunch of money, more likely to be able to get back to your life, more likely to be able to get back to work, to be able to make some more money so you're not at home. You guys know the drill. So it lets us be a little bit more targeted in the people that we can seek out for help, get to help faster, get back to living faster. Okay. Nicholas. Post-exertional malaise is being used to tell ME/CFS and long COVID patients to avoid exercise. Yet exercise clearly benefits POTS and autonomic dysfunction. I agree with you very much. I think the main issue is just what we talked about just now. Two things, dose and specificity. And if we can nail those two things, exercise is like the beast. It's the way. And we know that based on the corollaries from these other things. I love it. Great insight. Thanks, Nicholas. Denise Clark. I recently had surgery to improve the 10% blood flow on the left side of my brain, styloidectomy and jugular venous decompression. Are you seeing patients with Eagle syndrome and or jugular vein compression? Thank you. Yeah, so a little background for everybody. Some of you are probably familiar with this, but off the back of your head here, this is called the mastoid process. It's like this hard part on your skull. And then we have this little ligament that comes down into our neck from there. And from that, it kind of comes down like this. And it's just a little short, little nubbin. But sometimes that can ossify, that ligament can ossify. And it can make like this little toothpick-like looking thing. And it's ossified. And for some people, as that comes down, that bony, former ligament can actually be constrictive based on like head posture and position, can become constrictive to the internal jugular vein, which makes it harder to drain the blood out of the head. And you can see it on the imaging because it'll look like a big bulb right there where the styloid is at. So what they'll do is they'll just, kind of break that off like a little icicle, shave it off, and then with the hopes that it will allow that vein to drain correctly and then provide some relief and being able to circulate in the brain again. If that gets backed up, it's harder to push blood in too because it gets back up and congested. I might only have one side to be able to operate from, or if both are congested, then it kind of goes south pretty fast. So these are not uncommon. We see them a fair bit. I don't know that you can say a lot because they're not, like in the grand scheme of the general public, they're not that common, but like in the world of people that have, blood flow to the brain problems, they're more common. But yeah, we see these, and depending on how compressive that is, the angulation or positioning within the head, we may choose to see if it's worth doing the decompression versus doing conservative therapies that offload some of the compression based on positioning. But really great question. They happen more than people realize. This is something you can get imaged locally, and you can find out pretty quickly if this is something that you're dealing with, and that can move you toward a solution pretty quickly. Good question. You said you recently had surgery. I hope you're doing well. I hope it helped. Cool. Shannon Bamberg. Interesting stuff. See you again real soon. Love it. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Irene McBean. Have you found any relationship between possible pituitary damage or / severely imbalanced hormones and severe post-exertional malaise? Well, of course, yes, there can be a relationship there for sure. The pituitary damage, you're probably talking about like an empty sella, where these are actually, the frontal system disengages from the pituitary, so it atrophies kind of on the vine there. And then the thing to look at is if the adenohormones, the hormones that would be released from the pituitary gland, are we finding them in the bloodstream, or has that feedback loop shut down? In these cases, we want to try to see how do we reestablish these feedback loops so that those areas of the brain are able to do their normal thing. Pituitary gland problems will for sure affect circadian rhythms, energy balance, hormone balance, all the things. Hey guys, Kaiser family back from Sounds and Sights. All right. Oh, thank you for a hug. Oh, thanks, sweetheart. Do you have fun at gymnastics?
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Bedtime, last day of school. Love you guys.
Love you, Dad.
Oh, everybody wants to be up. Oh, sweetheart. Okay. Mwah. Say goodnight to everybody. Say goodnight.
Bye. Good night.
All right. Love you, girly.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you.
All right. Fun night tonight. Last day of school tomorrow. Exciting day. It's good stuff. Okay. Nicholas says, how can clinicians distinguish who truly risks PEM? It scares me to do exercise sometimes because of things like the updated NICE guidelines and long COVID. I think that's really tough. That's a good question. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to give you a different framework for exercise as a concept. So exercise is just doing work in a controlled way. So for most of human history, there wasn't so much a luxury of exercise. Exercise was just like a function of survival. So what they're saying is, like, don't do things that help you survive because they're bad, right? So exercise, it's hard to decouple from just like living and doing things that create survivability in humans. So by exercising, even if in a healthy person, what you're doing is increasing the capacity of physical activity that you can perform. So the logic then goes, if you are someone that is having a hard time being able to exist in the world, the natural course of that is that your capacity, your physical capacity is limited. I would be interested in hearing how someone would improve their physical capacity without doing physical things, without, like, for lack of a better word, without exercising that capacity, without creating that stimulus within the body, right? So there are things that you can do that support the stimulus. So it's kind of like if someone's taking steroids, but they're laying in bed, they're not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But if someone doesn't take the steroids and exercises, their capacity increases. You can also take the steroids and their capacity really increases, right? So at some point, part of the equation has to be doing more things. So when we look at exercise as a function of just like doing more things, it's probably actually a necessary part of recovery. I think what happens is we end up writing guidelines that are for like writ large groups rather than focusing on the specifics within an individual person. So I think that's where they break down is nuance is your friend as a patient. Like if you are someone dealing with a problem, you don't want to be lumped into the group and treated like the rest of the group. You want to be treated like you. And you want somebody to look at you like they understand you separate from anyone else in the world. It doesn't matter about anyone else in the world. All we're trying to do is say, what do we do to help you get better? And the more things that kind of give you insights in that way probably are going to serve you more than trying to say like, well, I'll just do the thing that everybody else is doing and hopefully we all get better together. Especially if we're talking about something like ME/CFS, where the vast majority of people are not doing great, right? Most of them are languishing. So we might not want to try to just do the same thing everybody else is doing. So it's a different way to think about it. Exercise is just a form of increasing capacity. Maybe we want to increase capacity specific in areas of lower outputs and then build from there. Good. I stand strongly by that for anybody who's interested. Okay. Janine, can PEM be addressed with chiropractic neurology and neurology rescue? Don't know what neurology rescue is. That sounds like marketing. But chiropractic neurology is just a function of like people like me that are looking at things on a functional level, like when Mathiasen asked for it earlier. So can it be? Yeah. Is it addressed by everyone? I don't know. We have to understand that individual case to know if it's going to be useful or not, or if there's a better way. Cool. If only our doctors would watch these videos. Some do. Christy Lee, before I found Dr. K, I was told to radical rest because I experienced PEM, but it ended up making me so much worse in the long run. So, great point, Christy Lee. One thing I do know for sure, and most of you that have been in, we've talked about this, where the functions you lose, that you give up, once you give them up and lose them, it's harder to get them back. It's way easier to keep them, even though that sucks and is stressful and is hard. But the more that you can keeping them is easier than rebuilding them again. So that advice kind of sucks because it's hard, but as much as you can do to try to maintain function, that would be a good goal. Even better goal is, can I start to target things in the way I move? Can I budget my exercise? Can I budget my outputs in a way where I can focus on my areas of deficit so that I can use my energy efficiently to build myself back up? So we should clip that and quote it because I think that's a lot of what I'm trying to get to in this conversation. Okay. Jessica, so interesting. Thanks. We were describing about the endothelial damage, the reason why COVID triggers POTS and neurological issues, migraine, brain fog, memory issues in so many people. I think that that's a big part of it. So that endothelial damage is one way that people are describing these problems that are related to being able to control the way that your blood is moved around in your body. It's dynamic, it's active, it's not just being pushed everywhere. It's got to be done actively, which means there's a brain involved. Awesome. Good summary by Jessica. Shannon says, just a good evening. Thanks, Shannon. Chrissy Lee says, sorry if you spoke on this already. I joined a little late. You're forgiven. Is there anything specific that may make someone more susceptible to endothelial damage from the sea? We don't know for sure. But that's a really good question that people are trying to understand better. Some of that may be things that are predispositional. Some of it just may be the way that particular protein interfaces with your system. That is a good question. There have been people that have taken some stabs at it, but I don't want to say them because I don't know that I'm certain of them. We'll leave that one still kind of open-ended in my mind. Can PEM be addressed by technology? We got to that. Tracy Poland, is there another way to describe when you would get what is typically called brain fog? Because if I explain I don't have proper blood flow to the brain, it sounds kind of crazy to people. I think it sounds perfectly brilliant to describe it that way. For a lot of people, that's what they're experiencing, is that precisely that they're not getting enough blood flow to the brain. I think it's worth it trying to be as specific as you can. So for some people, that might be I have improper autoregulation, or I have improper vasoreactivity or neurovascular coupling, or extraluminal carotid compression. But yeah, I think this is not to be glib, but I think calling it what it is forces other people to have to step up their knowledge base to come match you, rather than you oversimplifying things that are important to you in order to placate people. I think you can say what it is and then describe it. I think that's really useful. But I think it is also useful to call things what they are and then try to elaborate to give people a picture in their head. But basic thing is to say, like, the vessels don't expand and contract correctly, so the pressure's off. And if the pressure's off, a lot of people have probably felt dizzy at some point in their life, or they've felt a little woozy. And you say it's like that, but all the time. And give people that learning opportunity, I think, is really helpful. But it's a good point, because a lot of people feel crazy just talking about any of this stuff. I totally get that, but maybe let's try to elevate it for people and see if we can bring them along on the journey. Joanna. Also, some people say you have to fix PTSD before dealing with dysautonomia, otherwise you can't get better. What is your opinion on this? Does it keep dysautonomia going? Oh man, Somebody's selling you something. That's what that is. You have to fix it before dealing with dysautonomia is just like functionally wrong. You can't know that. And also PTSD is tied to a person's interpretation of an event. So that's a really hard thing to judge that on. I would say that whatever people go through things that give them PTSD, it can create attention and arousal errors. So we just get like higher limbic output. But like that's what should happen. If you're going through a health challenge, something's wrong, your body tunes up and is like, hey, let's pay attention and figure out what's wrong. I don't like this. I'm trying to get you to not like it too. Let's figure this thing out, right? So if you're not feeling well, you're going to feel like that most of the time. That should happen. If you get shot in the leg, you should not be able to just like take a nap right after that, right? You should be like, uh-oh, it should be a lot of pain. You should be trying to get out of there. You know, you may feel like you want to throw up or pass out and all the things at the same time. So I think that framing it that way is a poor framing, and probably from someone trying to sell you something. The reality is that you want to understand what is wrong. For a lot of people, they do experience trauma that does cause them to have this recursive loop where it's hard to disconnect it from your day to day, right? So that it becomes an intrusive event, and then an intrusive event can cause a scaling of that. But that's only going to be true if that is the source, and you can find that out. But for so many people, I see so many people that have been told you need to deal with that, only to find out like you got a thing wrong in your neck. Like you can do all the PTSD work in the world, and if you're still choking your neck, then it's not going to matter. So I think that is just kind of like a grossly negligent generalization that probably doesn't apply to a lot of people. But if you're finding that you've got some things that have happened in your life and you're trying to deal with those, you should deal with those too, for sure. But you should also know relatively quickly if that is the source code for the thing that is wrong with you. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Christy Lee, why do symptoms seem to worsen for many right before or during menstruation? Great question. Very common thing. A couple things to consider. Number one is that prior to menstruation, we're kind of like re-rigging a lot of hormone systems. We're seeing this big cascade of changes that are happening. So when do problems tend to happen are during changes or during dynamic activities. So that's when we're most likely to notice that there's a fluctuating change. Number two, for people that are dealing with vascular issues, we see changes in vascular conditions during that time because we're having to deal with blood loss, we're having to deal with platelet change, we're having to deal with like reorganizing red blood cell activities. It asks a lot of our bone marrow, asks a lot of our hormones, asks a lot of our kidneys to be able to manage the system. So if there's a fluctuation in that we have a latency for, like it doesn't kick in fast enough, or the size of the response isn't big enough, or there's an error in the response, during those transition periods is when they're going to be more likely to be experienced. So a lot of people will experience more symptoms right around their menstruation. It can be before, it can be during, and sometimes it can be even in a couple days after. So just something to keep in mind. Sometimes where that happens in the sequence can tell us a little bit about which phase in the cycle to kind of dive into and understand more. And in those cases, sometimes it's things that we want people to address from a hormone perspective, and sometimes we back them out and we actually try to address the kind of the other components and to affect the outcomes of regulating hormones as well. So that can be a nuanced thing for sure. But we'll see that a lot of times it takes a couple cycles to start to regulate and normalize for a lot of women that are going through that. So good thing to keep top of mind. Chrissy Lee, nailing it. Nice job. Rip Big, good to see you. Thanks for covering this topic and your experience. And these post-infection POTS getting more common or less now that COVID is less prevalent, and how does reinfection with COVID impact POTS patients? I think the biggest, my experience, just from my little slice of the world, has been the COVID-based injuries that are coming in are people that had this way back then and have just been like struggling with it all along, still struggling, and then finding their way in. I don't see as much of it now that is from more recent infections, especially. I don't see that much anymore at all. We'll still see iatrogenic causes where we're seeing, vaccination injuries. Those things are still happening, but not so much the original infections. Most of the infection-based ones are ones that we're seeing that are just lingering, and they look different. My experience, take it for what it is, was that at different stages there seemed to be kind of different waves of phenomenologies that were happening, where in some cases we'd see Guillain-Barré was like all of a sudden wildly common, and people are having these peripheral nerve injuries and Bell's palsy, and the vasculature in their legs doesn't work and stuff like that. And then we'd see that migrate to like, man, all of a sudden autoregulation is just dropping through the floor. So there was this interesting kind of waveform that came through with what we saw in different epochs of time afterwards. That was just an anecdote from me. Doesn't mean anything, but to me seemed interesting. Okay. Atara, shout out to Christy Lee. Great question. Rob says hello. Good to see you, Rob. Irene McBean, have you found any relationship between small fiber neuropathy and mitochondrial damage? It's hard to measure mitochondrial damage in a way that is useful for that. Also, mitochondria have the ability to kind of recapitulate. We talked about OXPHOS last week. Over time, we lose oxidative phosphorylation capacity. With anything where cells are damaged, you're going to damage the mitochondria that live within them. And then therefore, you're going to affect their energy capacity going out. Let me draw. Tell you what, team. I've been kind of getting this question coming up over time, so I'm going to do a little thing real quick. Let's see. You can see me draw here. So when I think about a cell, here's our cell. Ooh, let's move it over. Okay, so here's your cell. We're going to call this just one cell, but we're going to look at it like there's a lot of cells because there's so many in the brain. But if I got cells, those cells have a wall that you can see here, but then they've also got these little organelles inside, which is basically the internal structure. These are the mitochondria that make the energy. These are Golgi tendon Golgi tendon Golgi bodies. I'm stuck in muscles. Golgi bodies, ribosomes, and then the nucleus, right? I think I just drew a chocolate chip cookie, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, so all of these things are inside the cell. If they're inside the cell, all of these are made of structure. All of this structure is made of protein. Proteins are made up of chains of amino acids, so that you can guess that the charge of a protein is negative, right? So inside that cell, it's filled with a bunch of just negatively charged proteins, which is fine. But that means that the internal structure of that cell is going to be negatively charged, right? So if we just kind of look at the charge ratio, we'll make a graph. And so like this would be the resting membrane potential is going to be negative. So if this is 0 up here, it's negative. That's really important because the way that our cells work is by changing membrane potential and causing depolarization. So as I shift sodium and calcium, I get a spike train across that resting membrane potential, and it goes to an action potential. So when it goes to an action potential, that's what fires the neuron, right? Okay. So here's the deal though. If I have a cell that doesn't work as well, what's going to happen to all of this structure on the inside? The structure on the inside goes away. It gets reused for other things. It gets dissipated. It gets broken down. So then I get a cell that may be intact, but it doesn't have as much capacity. I'm from Michigan. I am an 80s child. So like the car industry and manufacturing is a thing I remember in my life. So if you have a cell, or if you have a factory that just, we're not selling enough cars, we start taking stuff out of the factory, right? And as you take stuff out of the factory, you repurpose it, sell it, it's not being used, your body's trying to be efficient, right? I get less negative. So if I'm less negative, right, there's my 0 point. If I'm less negative, it means my resting membrane potential goes from here to something more like here. In what used to cause an action potential there, well, I don't need as much energy to get there anymore. So the amount of energy that it takes to generate an action potential is going to be less, which means that cell is going to be more likely to fire. So it becomes more sensitive. So if it's more sensitive, it fires too easily. So that neuron can fire too fast. But the other part about that is it doesn't have as much capacity. We just said that. It's only got a little bit of working capacity. So it's also going to be more fatigable. Okay? Whoop. I'm falling off here. More sensitive, more fatigable. Okay? So some of you are going to look at that and go, you just described my whole life, right? So if these cells, I'm getting a cramp in my leg. Sweet. Good workout today. Okay, so if I'm more sensitive and I'm more fatigable, that means this cell is going to activate too quickly, and it's also going to fatigue too quickly. Fair enough? So when people kind of talk about mitochondrial activity and the ability to produce energy, that's true, but that presumes that the cell is healthy to start with. But if a cell is underactive, it's not working as well, it retools. The internal components are mitigated. We decrease the efficiency of the cell. If we decrease the efficiency of the cell, that includes mitochondrial activity, which means my overall output is going to be less. So sometimes it's probably more useful to think about your neurology in these terms to understand why certain areas may not function as well, or why areas that have hypoperfusion don't work as well, or why areas of injury don't work as well. And it can be a more useful way for some people to be able to understand how do we get that back. So by stimulating a cell within its threshold, even though it's sensitive, the beautiful part is when you stimulate a cell and you don't override it, then it's going to stimulate the internal nucleus to be able to pull in more structure again, to be able to meet the demand. And that is how cells modify and change. That's neuroplasticity writ large, right? So neuroplasticity is basically like if I do a thing over and over and over again, my cells get stronger. That's this process. And if those cells get stronger, the output goes up. They're not as fatigable. They don't get oversensitive. They're more accurate. They're more consistent. And then we see the output go up. So I think it's my perception, maybe true, maybe not. My perception is that a lot of people that talk about energy as a function of mitochondria are actually talking about this, where we're seeing overall cell function, we're not able to operate as well, which therefore is going to mean that we're not going to have as much mitochondrial efficiency. But of course we're not, because we're not using the cells. So you guys can let me know what you think about that. This is neuron theory. It's a super old concept, but I think it's really, really helpful in understanding functional energy outputs and like the actual utilization of energy within the neurological system writ large. Cool, so hope that helps. Okay. Double H asks about the patient from last week. This patient has not been in yet on schedule. We will see them soon. So we're looking forward to helping that. But we had another one that we should be getting an update from soon that did actually very, very well in the office. we're hoping that is going even better at home. We should be getting an update pretty soon about that as well. But that was a different one. But the one that I talked about hasn't been in yet for treatment. So we're looking forward to that. Thanks for following up, though. I appreciate that. The thought of permanent damage because of rehab is scary. It is scary, but also remember that you're dumping neurons every day. So you're killing neurons every day. You're making new dendritic synapses all the time. That's not the thing to I think prevent you from going forward. I think the thing that would prevent you from going forward would kind of be the inaction of all of it. So I understand where it's scary, but it's just like take the dose way down. Start where you can and work your way up. Go low and slow. Low and slow goes a long way. Atara says, this may be a silly question. However, can T4 flares and hypersensitivity be related to this? Ooh, I missed the moment on what this is. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what we're referring to. Carol Ann says, hello? Or damage to the myelin sheath from Atara. So myelin specific to peripheral nerves. Or excuse me. I'm sorry. I might, hopefully I'll catch you on this one as we keep going down. Surgeon says hi. Tide says, I'm a bit unsure if you said that too aggressive concussion rehab could cause permanent damage. You said temporary discomfort. I don't think I'd look at that as the thing that's going to be the damaging thing. I think trying to find a way to get stronger is the key. How many minutes a day walking should someone start with? No idea. How many minutes can you do right now is a good place to start. And then do more. I know that's not to be pejorative. That is like, what can you do right now? And then the goal is to add to that a little bit every day if walking is the goal and if walking is the thing that will solve your problem. Cool? Right on. Denise says, thank you. HA, when you say that exercise is good, what can be safe exercise? Hold on. What can be safe exercises that is good for brain and blood flow, but safe at the same time with symptom struggles? Okay. So I think what you're asking is like, how do we design exercise in a way that feels safe, both regarding symptoms and like kind of trying to thread the needle between doing enough to be helpful, but also not so much that it causes symptoms. That's why we have to understand what we're targeting. So this is kind of the rub because most of the way we think about exercise is kind of in a general, like physical exercise way. And what I'm saying is, I think physical exercise is wonderful, but for some people, you have to start a little bit lower than just broad physical exercise. You have to start a little bit more specific and work up to broad physical exercise. So without knowing kind of a little more of the nuance, it's hard to know where along that path you should start. So if you can already do those things, maybe we're just doing some activities that help you lean into that. If you're not there yet, then we have to build up into it. And you can see why that would make it hard to be able to give like a structure around that answer. That's why I think pairing the mechanism underneath it is so important for people. Susu, hello, says, have there been any connections between POTS or long COVID and long-term low-grade fever? I've had a temperature over 100 for a year. It's been to every doctor. Well, there's probably still some sort of infection if we're trying to keep that core temperature up. I don't know for sure, but I would lean into trying to understand why your body's trying to hold it up there. Shannon, that must have been when my girls came over. She said that was the sweetest thing. Sorry, everyone, for doing this. It's almost 5 a.m. here for me, so I might doze off. I have some questions draft, which I think I said I'd like to share. Sweet kids, happy last day of school for them. God help your money. Oh, your family's so sweet. Last day of school. Okay. Victoria says, love your teaching. Question. If red blood cells regenerate every 21 days and the old blood cells die off, would the new red blood cells have endothelial damage or on a continuous basis? No. Cool part is the endothelium is the vessel. It's just the tube. And the red blood cells traveling through the tube. So if we're regenerating them, that is part of the magic, right? Is trying to be able to stimulate the endothelial cells so they can like get all that crap off of them to be able to regenerate themselves, because the endothelial lining also is regenerating. It's just one cell layer thick. So we're trying to do things that will stimulate activity within those and help them to be able to regenerate. The red blood cell goop that's on there should decay over time as long as you can get adequate circulation coming through, which is why you'd want to understand, hey, how do I target getting some more blood through that vessel? Great question. Carol Ann says she has exercise intolerance. Yep. Yeah, I think that's pretty common here. Man. So Rob says, before seeing you, is there any value in seeing my local ophthalmologist or orthoptist? If so, what test should I ask for? I would have to know a little bit about more what's going on in this case. So probably like this venue, maybe not best. Maybe we try to reach out through an email and nailing down some of those questions. But a lot of it, I have to have a lot more history. Usually when I'm like, for me to make recommendations, like when people come in, before they come in, I'm taking their whole history before they even get here. People send in timelines and intake paperwork. So we have all that information coming in, and then we start like probing, asking questions, analyzing. That process takes a while. To try to do it through these size inputs are probably not sufficient. Let's try to nail it for real, and that would be great. I know it's really late where you are, so I'm sorry. I hope I got this in time, but let's try to do it and get it done right. I'll try to help. Carolina, I try to push myself, but I get a piercing headache at the base of both sides of my neck. Right, so we gotta, that's back to what I've been saying, talking about trying to use that budget of energy appropriately. We got it. I think you have red light treatment in your clinic. You mentioned that getting exposure to the sun is just as good. It's better. If not better. Sorry. How many minutes or hours per day should one get in sun exposure? Depends on your skin type, your climate, where you are in the season in terms of how much of the sunlight you're getting is red light versus UV. The general framework is kind of like as much as you can when it's just red light in the morning, working up to 20 to 30 minutes throughout the midday when the UV is high, in times of year when the sun's over, when the sun is high enough to get UV light. And then in the evening time, once the sun is starting to break that angle, and again, just as much as you can get, unless it's irritating your skin. It may irritate your skin a little bit. Not working too hard against you. Yeah, but like when it's just red light in the morning, try to get as much as you can within the heat tolerance. Middle of the day, try to get at least a couple minutes, working your way up 20, 30 minutes, and then beyond that, once your skin is tan and kind of built up that tolerance to the sun, and then after that, as long as you can in the evening time. So get on outside. That would be great. Good question. But it depends also on like where you live and how hot the sun is. Like Michigan sun, even in the summertime, the UV concentration isn't nearly as high as it is in the tropical areas like Cayman Islands. So you just have to kind of see where you live as well. There's a good app called D-Minder that I use that helps me kind of measure that and know when I'm getting UV, know when I'm not, so I can kind of dose that out a little bit. Danielle Judd says, I have a Nuka doctor and he speaks very highly of you. We'll tell him I said thank you for saying nice things. Shannon, I feel like that's the only way I've been able to function in my life is to keep moving even though it's really hard. It is a great way to at least try to hold your ground. Ooh, maybe that's the way we should say it. Say it as like holding our ground. I noticed this mechanical robot looking chair in your clinic. What is it used for? How is it similar or different from a gyrostem? It is similar to a gyrostem. It's just got some more bells and whistles on it with the ability to use oculography. It's got some built-in fancy things with calorics and some of the ways that we can change the angle of rotation. But it's just a way to create whole body rotation stimulus, so we can stimulate elements of your inner ear if we want to. We can add your visual system. We can change that with orthostasis and the way that we move your body. So it allows us to use it in different strategies for how we might want to stimulate those different systems together. So it's fun. It's a good time. Gina says, thank you. Taryn. Hi from Melbourne. Hello. That's my best Australian accent, by the way. I've been practicing. Tracy, thank you for your answer. That helps. I find myself really insecure in work situations when I mistype or didn't answer something properly or have to correct things that I've done when I feel better. Yeah, for sure. I think yeah, you asked a really great question about how do we communicate with people, and it's probably just like hoping that you entice them to be able to ask the next question, which can then help you explain a little bit more about what's going on. Perhaps as I rewatched your neck joint live streams, is it possible for neck joints and ligaments to misbehave after whiplash, although one may not experience any pain in the neck region? Yeah, for sure. You can still have dysfunction. Most people will a lot of people will experience pain, but we see some that don't. Some people also may experience, altered neck positions. They might feel like they get a little bit dizzy, or they feel off, or their eyes feel blurry. So some people will notice other things in addition to it, even if they don't notice pain. And then testing that out and seeing if that proprioception error is a thing is pretty useful. Taryn says, I've had PCs for 8.5 years. I have MCAS. Oh, this is maybe PCS, maybe like post-concussion syndrome. I have MCAS, unsteady boat feeling, a lot of gut issues, vestibular migraines, hypermobility, and still struggling a lot. I've done a ton of rehab. Next move. Maybe seeing if, I don't know for sure, but maybe if there's someone near you that's a functional or a chiropractic neurologist, that might be a really great place to start. These are kind of the common things that a lot of people on this stream and a lot of people that come to us are experiencing. That's a pretty common constellation. So maybe starting in that local area, Melbourne, I believe. We have some people there. Maybe Ginny can help get in touch. You might have already looked them up. You'll have to let me know. Rob, I guess I'm wondering, is it possible for one to have issues with the neck, which could be contributing or be a source to their symptoms, yet do not experience any pain? Yeah, they can for sure. And sometimes it may be just the way all those things are interfacing together, and your neck may be a confounder to that, like making it a little bit worse, even though that might not be where the error itself is coming from. Just the processing of it makes it harder. So it's the same as like, you can think about like people with post-concussion may notice that they just get overwhelmed if there's a lot of people in the room, or there's a lot of talking, or there's a lot of noise, and it's just like generally overwhelming. It's just that the whole processing event is harder. So that can happen as well in that central vestibular processing, where even just if we're having to over-process afferents from the neck that aren't matching what we're experiencing with our eyes and our ears may also cause symptoms to get worse, even though it's just from the processing volume that comes in with that neck. Good question. In this case, it could be easy for one or a practitioner to dismiss the neck as a source and not look at it in detail. Yeah, for sure, especially with no pain. That's why looking at like joint error, looking at positioning error, and then how those are relative to eye activity and vestibular activity can be really helpful. Melissa, hola! Dígame, can you see? And then Joanne says, oh, also, Melissa, I loved your video this week. I like the elevator music. That was perfect. Can you see CSF leaks in your clinic? And can the spinal block epidurals in birth/C-sections cause this? I cannot directly test for a CSF leak. It's a harder thing to do because it's hard to measure it's kind of hard to measure the opening pressure if there's a leak and know to what degree, unless it's leaking real bad. Those are really hard to do. A lot of places actually don't measure for it. They will just do a blood patch and hope you feel better. And they just kind of do that as a therapeutic trial. Jessica says, I've seen so many doctors in the past 3 years, and your understanding or way of talking about this is helpful. Thank you for your effort trying to help those of us really suffering with no answers. Thanks for saying that, Jessica. I really appreciate that. Joanna says, I got dysautonomia and MCAS mainly after C-section, so wondering if that contributed. Yeah, that is, I wouldn't say that's the most common way, but it's definitely one that we've seen in the past. Not in the past, that we see from time to time as a consequence. And some people will get these and they don't know what exactly to attribute it to, just because there's like the overall like childbirth process. So it's hard to pin it to the C-section or not. So, but a lot of people will notice, like, you know, in the postpartum process, they develop dysautonomia, and then upon looking, they also may have had a C-section with that. Matheson says, do you feel it is important for you to know if your patient with head injury and POTS has had COVID or not? Some might not know if they've had it or not, or would the treatment be the same regardless? I like to know. I like to know as much as I can about everything. Some things are impossible to know for sure. So you're kind of dealing with probabilities. But if it's knowable, I want to know it for sure, because it may change the way that I approach the investigation of it. Just trying to hunt around and understand the problem more. So yeah, if it's knowable, I definitely want to know. But if it's unknown, like there's, you know, you can only work with what you have. A lot of people actually, what's an interesting caveat to that is just a lot of people, just in the conversation of asking them questions, we oftentimes come to things or uncover things that people didn't even think about or didn't think were relevant, or might even come back in like a day or two after and be like, I was thinking about that more, and then I remembered XYZ. Because I'll ask, and you know, something will sound like, man, this really sounds like, not sounds like, this looks like someone that has injured their brain, but we don't see any brain injury here. Are we sure? So let's walk back through. Is there something here that we should be digging for? Then I might get like 2 days later, like, oh yeah, there was this one car accident I had that one time. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling on that, but anything that's knowable, I want to try to know about. Becky says, hello Becky. I got dysautonomia after taking Lupron, which shuts down sex hormones, and had a few months prior to that of severe anemia due to fibroids. Most of my symptoms have resolved, but I have lingering balance problems. Had testing that confirmed ears are okay. Love that. Especially after lying down and in the dark. How would you go about testing to find the causal solution here? Great question. I'm sorry to hear about that. So a couple different things to consider. I want to know like way more to be able to solve for that. But just like something that helps everybody out might be looking at these two things after lying down and in the dark. I would be curious to dive into that with someone to understand how those things are related, and then like what the balance problem actually looks like. Is this a pulsion? Is this disequilibrium? Is it vertiginous? Is it like sense of motion? Is it falling? Like, what are we dealing with? Not that we need to answer that right now, because I'm going to be able to give you like a specific advice because we're on the internet. But like those are the things that I would look at, and then compare that to why in the dark matters. So is there a visual component to that, a processing component? Is there an auditory component to that? And start to kind of dig in from there. So those are some of the first things I'd start to try to investigate. Hopefully, since you had some vestibular testing done, maybe there's someone that you can kind of go back to and see how those integrations may be useful. Okay. Arterial, thoracic outlet, MALS, IBD, dysautonomia, a fibro. I don't know if that's a fibroid or fibromyalgia, hypermobile, surgical history, rare med reaction, SIBO, pineal cyst, migraines, horseshoe kidney, heat intolerance, concussion, tip of the iceberg. Okay. I don't know if there was a question or if that comes later. Might come later. We'll hold that in suspense. Oh boy. Irene, please repeat what you said earlier about oxidative phosphorylative blank. I missed part of that and sounded really relevant to my issues. What I'll do, this will be available after the live stream. Go back to the part where you see me drawing cells. Listen to that whole part. That is kind of like a simple explanation of neuron theory. Look at neuron theory. That is a wonderful way to start to understand both what can go wrong when neurons aren't getting activated enough, and also how they rebuild when we add stimulus to them again. So if that works out, that might be like the core thing to go back and listen to again. Dr. Ginia, oh hello. So I haven't read this question yet. I can't tell if she's baiting me yet or not, but we're gonna find out. Why in mitochondria dysfunction can you not utilize a typical functional medicine approach in supplements, CoQ10, B12, etc., to push energy back in itself? Because you have to activate it. That's the whole thing. Great question. So in order to use any of the nutrition, you have to activate the cells. And so one of the things so many people are dealing with is that the barrier is in the activation. So we're not able to push them, we're not able to drive them effectively, and therefore not able to use that fueling. It's kind of like we want to top all that stuff up so it's available to push into the cell, but we need to build up the substrate that lives with the machinery that's inside of the cell to increase the capacity so that it can use all of that nutrient coming in. So just like bathing it in the nutrient, like wrapping it around it and hugging it, may not be enough. You may have to actually stimulate the neuron in a way that generates growth relative to the pathway it's in and the other areas within the brain to be able to go from like losing that specific function to be able to re-add it to the more generalized functions that just come with being a human being again. So if I'm noting like these pathways that control my arm aren't working well, then anything that I do that's kind of using that arm may have a delay to it, may have a latency, may have an inaccuracy, may soak up more bandwidth, and may make me symptomatic. Cool? So Dr. Ginia, I think she knew that I just wanted to say that so bad that she brought that in there for me to throw me a softball. Thank you. Sarah says, thanks for all the free info. Game changer to understand what's happening in my daughter's body. I'm very happy to hear that. Knowledge is power. This is so empowering. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. Ray says thanks as well. Appreciate you guys. Someone, I don't know, Solaire is just trolling apparently. Who knows? Rob, I've been having thiamine, benfotiamine for the last 3 months because I read it's meant to be good for nerves and brain. I have no idea if it's working. I don't know either, Rob. I don't want to dissuade you from doing anything, so being able to measure afterwards and being able to test out the progress would be really useful. Hope it's working though. Atara says, I forgot as well. Dang brain fog. I got too much information flowing through my brain. I feel you on that. Hey, you're with good people here. No judgment. We're all dealing with our stuff. Irene says, Joanna posted, I remember Doc talking recently about some people developing dysautonomia after anesthesia during surgery. Absolutely. Irene coming up with a memory. Love it. Rob thanking Christy Lee for Instagram stories and sharing her experience. Yeah, they made some wonderful videos just kind of showing her process, but just being also like open to what they're going through. It's not easy. I wouldn't say anything that we do with people is easy. I see every single day people that are wildly tough, motivated, tenacious, strong people. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't be able to do what we ask of them. And the outcomes are wonderful, but it's also work to get through it, and it's scary, and it can feel like you're confronting everything that you're afraid of in your life in a very short period of time. And so being open and vulnerable about all those things we really appreciate. And not that Christy Lee had a particularly hard share. I think she did a wonderful job, and she's very gracious in doing that. So just thanks to her, and thanks to everybody else who's on that journey. Rob says talking about Christy Lee's video, shared them with family and close friends, getting through my TBI dysautonomia with my wife and kids as I live abroad, hoping your stories truly help them understand my suffering. That's really great. Andrea just found out that her daughter C1 disc is missing and overly straight. Starting with chiropractic chiropractor healing meds. She has seizures when passing out. That is, yeah, those that. Hoping the best for you. Happy to help however we can in supporting you. The team that's here with us will be thinking about you as well. Think about your daughter. Johanna says, final one from me. We will see. What percentage of your patients make significant improvement during rehab, and what percentage keep that improvement after rehab? I don't have that percentage offhand. We haven't done a post-hoc in a while. But I would say we're very lucky to have a lot of people that do really well. And keeping it after rehab is a function of just keeping up with the game, right? And a lot of people are really good at that. This is a group of very motivated, captivated people. So like these are people that work hard and they keep doing that, keep building. So that's usually not the thing. Our biggest thing that we're trying to aim for most people, is proof of concept. So we measure a problem, say here's what we think we might be able to achieve, and we say let's go for it, and then we'll test it again in a little bit, a couple days. And what we're really trying to do is see, can we move the needle at all? Because if we can move the needle at all, that is like the hardest part. Because if you can move it, then all the stuff we talked about with neuroplasticity, all the neuron theory, it means that there's a chance that those things are available. And if they're available, then it just becomes like, can we continue the stimulus at enough dose to keep them climbing, keep them going, keep solving problems forward? So the big domino you're trying to push over is, can we make this needle move at all? And if we do, then we're just all in, pushing people after that, pushing them to get home, pushing them to work harder, kind of build it back into their life and move from there. So that would be my advice. We haven't done the post-hoc on that in a while. We did it once, and I don't remember the numbers, but it's high, but it sounds braggadocious to say it. And also a lot of people are very different, so I don't want other people's experience I don't want people to extrapolate someone else's experience into their own, and make an assumption that I can't support. So that's just my feeling on it. But it's probably good data to collect. We should probably do that at some point. It's just a lot of work. SD, any cooling suggestions for outdoor heat tolerance? Just started using a cooling vest with an ice water band. Those are actually pretty slick. Those cooling vests can be really helpful at getting you outside and being able to dissipate the heat while also gaining some sun exposure. We talked about this today. We're getting into the season where I really like the contrast of being able to like be outside a little bit, get a little bit warm, and then in the pool cool off. Once that settles in, back up, trying to be able to get in the heat, cool off. So that contrast therapy, the old Finnish sauna style, where you can just get little exposures to gain ground in both directions, can be helpful once you're at that stage where that's appropriate. Oh, we got Taryn and Rob, both Melbourne. Love it. And then Dr. Virginia put the ACMB Dr. Locator in there, which will at least give you some people that are trained in functional neurology. Oh, Irene, just shouting out to Melissa about to do an exercise with a swivel chair on Instagram. Super awesome. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell people about these things or not, because I don't know if people want to be followed or not. So you guys can guide me on that. So I'm always like cautious to share those things in case people don't want me to. Rob had mentioned last time that I think dysautonomia can be caused by anesthesia as part of surgery. Yep, catching up with that. Do you know from your experience with cases if it's from general or local or both? General is the one that I'm typically seeing when I see those cases. After Virginia, I'd never bait you. The reason Rob was asking, because they never advise that as a potential risk of the surgery as part of informed consent, that stuff, and they might not know. I'm not sure. That's a good point. I mean, Lisa, is genuine compassion for others a prerequisite to becoming a functional neurologist? After meeting everyone at the clinic and then meeting Dr. Purcell yesterday, I'm seeing a trend. Yeah, Dr. Ray Purcell up in New York, awesome person, just a heart of gold. Some of you may have known him or may know him. If you don't, he's just one of my favorites. So we appreciate him. Rob, it would be helpful for patients to make informed decisions, especially for elective surgeries, for sure. Yeah, I think in some ways that might not be published well enough for them to know. But the informed consent stuff is usually, there's usually a lot with that. Whether or not people are getting that is unknown. That's a good point. Jensen said this has been amazing and informative. Thank you. A lot to consider. Appreciate the tools and terminology. Awesome. Glad I could help. Chrissy Lee says glad she could help Rob. Becky, do you know of any functional neurologists in Germany? I know of a young man there who needs one. I don't, off the top of my head. In Germany, might have to consult the doctor locator there to find someone. Sorry for that. I don't know someone off the top of my head. And if there's a German person that I know that I should know, I'm sorry, but I don't think I do. Chrissy Lee, we already miss our friends at the Kaiser Clinic. We miss you a whole ton. We're waiting for you to come back. Just come back and live here in Chelsea Town, and just make it your own. Who knows? Sorry, everyone, just venting here as someone's first dysautonomia symptom having significant impact to quality of life started from an elective surgery, which could have been avoided. Yeah, I get that, but I think you're in good company. A lot of people here definitely understand that. Mallory. Hi, Dr. Kaiser. I've been dealing with debilitating visual symptoms that nobody's been able to figure out. I was diagnosed with POTS, and I'm wondering if you've seen patients with this. Thanks. With visual symptoms, yes, but I am not sure. Yeah, a lot of POTS has visual symptoms so anything where we're affecting cerebral perfusion has a high probability of affecting whatever areas are underperfused. So if that means for you, there are areas related to vision, that's definitely a possibility and a thing. It can also be that whatever was the initiating factor that caused the POTS in the first place could also be relative to the visual system. Those are some of the things got to figure out. Cool. Ash says, any chance I have POTS, dizziness, heavy and fast heartbeats after standing or walking, chest tightness, alcohol is a massive trigger? Could be. I did a video 2 videos ago. You can go click on the lives and look at the one where it's like the 7 steps or the basic diagnosis for POTS. I did it in 4 steps maybe. Go take a look at that, and that is a really good place if you're just kind of trying to figure out what's going on and get your bearings. That would be a good one to watch because it's talking about like the chronicity, how long you've had it, what the symptoms look like, what other things to make sure you rule out, and then how to look at that diagnostic process of getting started to kind of figure out where you are in the world. If you have time, try to go take a look at that one. I think that'll help you be able to get your hands on it. So good luck. Hope we can be helpful for you. All right. Cool. All right, team. Well, if that wraps up our questions, I really appreciate having you here. We got one more, it looks like, from Sarah. And then I am going to start getting to bed. I've been staying up till 10. Super late for this old man. So I'm going to take the chance to try to go give the kiddos a hug before bed. And then I will see you all next week. So Sarah, last question here says, do symptoms generally change as the years go by, or do they stay the same? My daughter doesn't pass out anymore, but used to all the time. Her symptoms are different now than they were 2 years ago. Do you see that? I see that go both ways. I'll see some people that things kind of like go like this, like a little up, little down, but stay generally the same. I see a lot of people that do experience some improvements. Most of them are just churning for them too. I love the fact that she's not passing out anymore. That's fantastic. Then it's looking at like, okay, we've got a little more adaptability. At least I'm not passing out. And then we say like, well, what is the next hurdle to get over? But a lot of people will experience that. Usually things in that first stage are harder, and then some things get easier, some things don't. That's typically the path that a lot of people are on. Good question. Okay, Corey, good to see you. Let me know how that project's coming. Corey is going to be the greatest innovator in medical history, so we're really counting on him for that. Joanne, thank you. Eileen, thanks. Chrissy Lee, thanks. You rock too. I appreciate you guys. Atara, thanks so much. I didn't know you were coming. I'm looking forward to seeing you too. Becky, thank you. All right, team. We will be back next week. I'll have a topic for you a little early. I changed my topic because this came through and I was like, ooh, I really want to talk about that. A little bit selfish, but I'm trying to find ways to talk about COVID without having the video taken down, basically. So I think we did it right. I think it was honest. And hopefully we can keep doing that, keep helping some folks. If you know anybody else that's struggling, by the way, because I know a lot of people will meet people through different groups and different avenues that they're connecting with. If you think it's helpful, send them over so they can ask some questions. Maybe I can help, maybe I can't, but at least we can start and try. Okay, so I appreciate that. I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you guys. Thanks Corey, thanks Mallory, thanks Tracy, thanks Christine. Thank you guys. Have a good night. Melissa, good night. See you next time. Try to feel better this week, everybody. A little bit, day by day. We'll talk soon.